The 2010 U.S. Census is underway, and now it's up to each and every one of us to make sure it counts. Why is the census so important? Beyond statistical information, how does the information help out our region? And why is it important to have an accurate count of not just U.S. citizens, but also non-citizen legal residents, non-citizen long-term visitors, and illegal immigrants? Tonight, the U.S. Census and how all of this information is used. I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8. The first U.S. Census was taken in 1790 and estimated the population of the country at just under 4 million. The 1850 census included questions about social issues such as taxation, churches, pauperism, and crime, and for the first time asked for the names of all members of the household. A slave tally was also introduced that year, but would only be done once more, in 1860. Censuses of the late 19th century included agricultural and industrial schedules to gauge the productivity of the nation's economy. Mortality schedules captured a snapshot of lifespans and causes of death throughout the country between 1850 and 1880. In 1890, tabulating machines were introduced to help speed up processing, reducing the tabulation time from almost a decade to a mere 2.5 years. The 1920 census estimated the population at a little over 106 million people, the first time our population exceeded 100 million. Starting in 1940, thanks to Title 44, the Public Printing and Documents Act, results from the U.S. Census are now held for 72 years to both protect individual privacy and encourage participation by all people residing in these United States. The 2010 census is now underway. What will we learn about our country, our home life, and the effects the recession has had on our population? Joining us tonight are Marcus Davis, National President, Texas Southern University Alumni Association; Margaret Wallace, Manager, Houston Counts, City of Houston; and Sylvia Garcia, Harris County Precinct 2 Commissioner. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you for having us.
First of all, I guess the big question is why? Why do we do a census? And I'll start with you, Commissioner.
Well, you know, the first simple answer really is we've got to do it because the Constitution says so. It's mandated by the Constitution that every 10 years everybody has to be counted. And it's important because it sets the framework for who gets elected to Congress. The numbers drive the number of congressional districts. Then for us in our pocketbooks, it's the number of dollars that come back from Washington to our local communities for a number of services that help us provide a better quality of life for everyone locally. So it's a very important process, and it's mandated, and it's something that we need to do for ourselves.
Marcus, why is it important to you?
Well, I would say the same reasons. You know, being a taxpayer, I think it's very important that our city, our community, has the proper allocations of dollars. By everyone being counted, and so if we're not counted, then we don't get the funds back to the city, back to the state. Also, from a business perspective, it's very important to have that type of data as you look to make investments in different communities regarding your business. It's good to have an idea of what the population looks like.
Margaret, we talked about in the piece setting up the story that for 72 years they hold the information. But we know what the population count is. We know of that. What is held and what's made available?
Well, the information off the forms is made available to all the agencies, to the City of Houston, to businesses as they purchase the data. What is held in confidence is what the individual form says. When you fill out your questionnaire and you put it in the mail and send it back to the Census Bureau, there is somebody who actually does the tabulation from it, but then no one sees that form beyond that for 72 years. Your personal information and the fact that you filled that out is what's held confidential.
So no one knows who exactly is who, where they are, all of that, and the information that's put on there.
And Ernie, if I may, that is critical because I think there is some concern in some populations that the information will be used to turn it over to IRS, to turn it to immigration, to turn it to the FBI. But actually, nobody sees that. Even Secret Service, if they want to protect the president, can't get census data on you. It is something that is punishable by fine up to $250,000 and also maybe even prison. So no one gets that information. It is private, confidential.
And, you know, of course, there's always people out there that when the government says something is private and confidential, they don't buy into it. And looking into the research on all of this, if my information is correct, that the U.S. did use the census in the 40s for Japanese internment camps. So there was an act passed so that they could have access to that. So when we sit here and say that it never will be, there could be circumstances where this information could be used, correct or not?
Well, I know that since that happened, there's been an additional act now that says nobody can get it. You know, everybody that works at the Census Bureau has to swear under oath that they will not give the information to everyone, and they're subject to penalties and they're subject to potentially prison. So I think that every effort is being done now to make sure that that information just doesn't get to anyone else.
And while those things may have occurred, we can't allow single incidents to deter the greater good of what the census is about.
Absolutely.
You know, you have these rarities where someone may decide that they're not going to do the right thing. But the most important thing is we've got to do what's best for our community right here, right now.
What is the harm that can come to you from filling out a census? I walk into this maybe a little naive, as I sometimes do in topics, but they want to know how many people live here for the number. Why is there some concern about doing these?
Well, I don't believe there is any concern. I don't think there's harm because of the penalty for disclosure, because of the confidentiality aspect of it. We believe very strongly that this is a very safe thing to do. There are communities that are afraid of it, though, for a variety of reasons. Apathy is one other reason. In this economy, particularly with multiple job households, it might be the last thing on your to-do list for the day, and so you may not even get around to it, put it aside and plan to do it in the next week and then forget about it. And there's also the fear of, as we talked, as the Commissioner said earlier, that some other federal agency or even some local law enforcement agency could see it and get a hold of it. We know that that's not going to happen, and that's part of the message that we've got to get across, is that it is safe.
You are an illegal immigrant, a non-documented worker in this country. Why should you fill this out?
Well, the same reasons everyone should, because you need to be counted, because it helps bring resources back to the community, whether it's the after-school program at your child's school, or the school lunch program that your children take in, whether it's a road project that I'm working on, transportation services. You know, we often say that Washington takes our money, we never get it back. This is one way you can ensure that you get it back. Mm-hmm. So much so that they say that in the next 10 years, each individual, if you're counted, that means you're bringing back about $13,000 in the next 10 years. If you multiply that by 4 people in the household, do you want to shut the door to about $40,000 coming to your neighborhood in the next 10 years for better quality of life? And I think most people would say no.
That's why, you know, in the opening I stated that it's important to me because I'm a taxpaying citizen, and I believe it's important that I get my tax dollars back at every opportunity available.
Right. And so many people use it because business owners use it. They look at census data to see what the population is in a neighborhood if they're looking to put in a retail establishment or a neighborhood business. Corporate, you know, large companies use it all the time for relocation, for looking at where their potential employees might be coming from.
Yeah, there's certain areas of town that say we never get these businesses in our community. One may be because the data that they're receiving, that the corporations are receiving, don't justify the investment in that community. So if you're desirous of having businesses come to your community, they have to have a financial reason to make that investment.
The data stays there for 10 years. It's not just government who uses the data and the private sector. It's even the philanthropic community, foundations, people who donate dollars. If he goes over there and says, we need a clinic in my neighborhood, they'll look at the numbers and see, are there really that many people there to justify the clinic? Are there enough children that are going to need the immunization in that neighborhood? I mean, the philanthropic community, everybody uses that information for studies on diseases. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to be counted because it is a number that stays there for 10 years, and it drives the dollars in so many different areas.
And I want to go deeper into all the benefits of that, too. But before I move totally away from the last question, if you are illegally in this country, I'm assuming you spend the majority of your time trying not to be counted, staying out of the line of attention. Without that, how do you get to that community and say, fill out this questionnaire to tell us you're here and where you live, but it's okay, you're safe,
Right.
don't worry about it.
Research shows that the number one way to motivate someone to complete their census form is if someone they know and trusts asks them to do it. If the pastor at their church, if the woman who works at or the person who works at the health clinic where they get their immunizations for their children, if the friend or the business owner where they go frequently tells them, I believe it's safe, we think you ought to do this, this is good for our community. That's the number one motivator for those communities, is to someone that they trust. And so we've got, both Harris County and the City of Houston have a very, very concerted ground campaign going on where we are going to try to get with every community organization and every service provider to help them understand they've got to talk to their clients.
And if you fill this out, this information is not going elsewhere.
That's the message.
If you are here illegally, this has nothing to do with that
Absolutely.
struggle you're going through.
We will
Absolutely.
visit with all people, all the clergy leaders, faith leaders. We'll visit with the schools. We'll visit with clinics. We're visiting with everybody to help reinforce the message that it's safe and it's simple, and it only takes 10 minutes.
And it's beneficial.
Yeah, and it's 10 questions long.
It is 10.
10 questions,
And
10 minutes.
I don't mean to poke fun at it, but I have to go with question 1 and 2 just to prepare people, because these haven't arrived yet. They will be receiving them when?
The next couple
About
of
March
weeks.
15th, March 17th, somewhere in that. They'll be dropped into the mail sometime in the second week in March.
And when do you have to have it back?
You should have it back by
By
April
April
1st.
April 1st. Okay, first question on it, if I have these correct, is how many people were living or staying in the house, apartment, or mobile home on April 1st? Second question, were there any additional people staying there? Explain the redundancy in these forms.
Well, I think part of that might, I think part of that might have to do with, I've got someone who is living with me kind of on a long-term basis. Maybe they're going to be here 6 months or more. But then we've also got a friend or a family member
Right.
who has lost their home and will be here for a very short period of time, a couple weeks.
Right.
And so I might not automatically think to include that second person on my form. And I think that second question is a trigger to, are you sure you got
It may
everybody?
remind you that you have a cousin that's sleeping on your couch for 3 months.
Or in
Forgot
our
about the
area, it could
cousin.
be
Yeah.
someone that is from Galveston or an area that was their homes were damaged by a Hurricane Ike. They're staying temporarily with you. I mean, it could be a number of things. So, I think it's kind of fun when you just literally read it, but it's meant again to just trigger your memory of making sure that it's the people that always live with you and live with you on April 1st. But if someone's there
It is
temporarily,
a count of where everyone is April 1st,
Yes.
On that day.
bar none.
so if you're
So-
in jail, you're in a nursing home, you're studying,
Away in college.
away in
Somebody
college.
visiting you is staying at your house that day. They're counted on your census form because that's where they are. Like my mom's down here for a couple of months visiting from the east. She is in my house on April 1st. I count her in my household. She doesn't count up in New York,
Well,
correct?
unless she's
Not
already-
correct.
No, New York would argue with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
How do
she
you
may
decide?
she may have
She's
gotten-
visiting.
She's visiting, and she probably got hers back in New York.
York.
Right.
So
Yeah.
she should
And she has
probably fill
another
out that
place
form.
of residence.
So
in those-
it's
yeah.
not where you are on April 1st. It's
where
where
you're
you
living.
consider your residence
Yes.
on April 1st.
Absolutely, that's the key.
Okay, because
You're
then
a
we get
resident.
the taxpayer dollars then back into Houston where she wouldn't get them back in
Correct.
New York.
Right.
So everyone should keep that in mind if someone is visiting them, but they will return to a residence.
Right.
And quite honestly, that's been a challenge with northern states for many years because many of their older residents, if they're spending their winters in Brownsville or Florida or
Right.
somewhere else, and they are still there in April, the challenge has been where do they spend most of their time? So that is a question that everybody really needs to answer, I think, for themselves.
Think where
do
you
they
get
live?
the benefits of social services mostly. Would that be a way to...
Where do you really call your residence?
Okay. Talk a little bit about where all of this information goes as far as in our daily lives. So we have filled out the census and submitted it, and now Congress counts all of this all these numbers up. Now, how is it coming back to us? When you say it comes back to you in lots of different ways and taxpayer benefits, what exactly do we get back? What will Houston benefit from a strong showing in the census?
Well, $400 billion every year.
How many?
back.
$400 billion every year of federal spending is allocated to communities based on their census numbers. So for every person that is counted as a Houstonian, that increases the number, or as counted from our community, that increases the number and increases our likelihood that we'll get a bigger piece of that $400 billion.
And then that $400 billion is spent on what?
It could be a number. There's a number of federal programs. For instance, I built a park and ride in Pasadena and in Baytown that then connects to the metro services. That was all per capita, the number count dollars for mobility initiatives in Harris County. It could be the after-school program in your neighborhood. It could be a clinic. It could be a road project. There are so many federal dollars at stake. It's trillions and trillions in the next 10 years that if we don't have an accurate count, that money doesn't come back. So again, it boils down to, we can criticize Washington all we get. This is your chance to do something about it. Be counted. Get those federal dollars back to work in our community.
And with healthcare being the topic of the day, I can't stress enough how important this is to emergency rooms. When the data shows that a certain group of people use emergency rooms as their primary care, it's important that those communities get the dollars that will enhance that facility so that it can give good medical care, health care to the people that need it.
Well, let's move beyond, if you want to stay on this topic for a moment, let's move beyond money, because as the Commissioner said earlier, it's also representation. It's congressional districts, it's redistricting in Austin, and for the city of Houston, it's adding two more single-member council districts. So having an accurate picture of who lives where allows the redistricting efforts from top to bottom to be more accurate and to be far more representational.
So there are two more single-member council districts as well as two congressional seats that Houston will be in line for.
If we have more people fighting for us in Washington, theoretically we'll be getting
more dollars back.
Get more
fighting for us.
Talking about government again, going back to the internet too, people are concerned at the information that's being gathered on the form by what's allowed by the Constitution, which is, as we said at the top, every 10 years the people are to be counted. But then we have other information in here. We have what is your phone number. We have your age and date of birth, the person's sex, their national origins, things like that. Where does the right to ask those questions come?
Well, all those numbers really are about trying to figure out where the services need to go. For instance, if you are looking at whether or not a certain community needs more after-school programs, well, you need to know where those under 6-year-olds live.
Well,
so you
and
wouldn't,
I
you
understand
wouldn't
the
send the
necessity
money
of it.
Right.
But the question, because there is a representative from Minneapolis, I do believe, who has said she will not fill this out because all she will do is say how many people are in her household. That's all the government has a right to know. So all of the rest of the questions, is there law that protects the asking of it, that protects us as individuals for giving that information, as opposed to just the tally of number of people in homes?
I frankly don't know if there is a law that would protect us. I'm not sure that everyone, if someone really didn't want to fill out all 10 questions, I don't think that the census is going to bounce it back if you only fill out 9
your form
questions.
Still gets counted if it's incomplete.
Oh, it does. Because I know that there is also a penalty up to a $5,000 fine if you don't fill out the census.
Right, but I don't really think that that's ever been enforced. It's kind of like when you get your jury summons, it does say there's a penalty, but when was the last time you saw a constable go pick you up because you didn't show up for jury duty? I think it's something that probably would not be enforced in my view, and this is just my personal view. But I think if someone fills out 5 and not all 10, it's not going to get bounced back, and no one's going to come knocking on your door. But that's the key. You need to fill it out.
Incomplete information.
I think the important thing to remember, yes, the law states that you can. It's only about how many people are there, but the true benefits are in the details of race, of age, of other things that we need to know in order to receive some of the philanthropic opportunities that are out there.
Now, we did talk a little bit at the beginning about, you fill it out, return it. Before the show even started, we talked about, and if you don't, someone's going to come visit you. And the biggest concern a lot of people have is they don't want someone to come visit them.
Well, then,
so the easiest thing is just fill it out. But if I understand, so if you do not fill it out, they come up to 6 times they'll visit you at your home to try and gather this information.
Right.
7?
Yeah.
They'll come quite a few. I've heard from Census Bureau employees any number of times. I've heard someone say they'll even come 12 times. But through July, they will be coming and knocking on your door.
And that's because they need to get this accurate count.
Yeah.
So if you don't want someone knocking at your door, fill it out and send it in.
Back.
Of course, the ironic question for me is, if they know I didn't fill it out so that they can come knock on my door, didn't they know I was there to start with? Why do I need to fill this out? They mailed it to me because they knew where I was. They came to my house when I didn't return it, so obviously they track me in some way. Why do I even have to fill this out in today's day and age?
Confirmation, validation, but they don't know how many people are in that house.
What they know is that it's a residential structure.
Right.
And they don't know whether anybody is technically living in it. They know we've been governmental agencies across the nation have been working with the Census Bureau for up to 3 years to actually do what they call the local address updating. And so through that process, they know where all the residential structures are, but they don't know who's living in them or if anybody's living in them. And so they will know that they didn't get a form back from a specific address, but they don't know how many people live in that address, what the ages are. The data that's on the form, they don't have any clue of.
Right.
Let me just say that I was a enumerator once. I worked for the census, and I think it was when I was working my way through law school. Work-friendly people. I mean, they're your neighbors, and there's a lot of, room for volunteers to help with the census. There's a lot of people who will be hired, because we do want people from your own neighborhood to be the ones to come visit with you. It's not going to be some stranger or someone from Washington. It's someone in your own community. And I can tell you that I love doing it, because you knock on people's door, you get to visit with them a little while, then you move on to the next one. It's kind of like, my old social work days. So, I mean, I don't think anyone has anything to fear from, filling it out or from having someone come visit you. But if you don't want someone to see you, I mean, like we all said, then just fill it out.
Now, we know during the holidays this last year that people were following UPS trucks, and as they delivered a package, someone would come and steal the package. So you know that there's people out there that are scamming. How do you know that person that knocks on your door, now that these same people know census is going on, this is a good time, how do you know who's coming to your house and that they're an official census collector? Because they're asking you somewhat personal questions.
Yeah.
They will have a picture ID, credentials. Yeah. They will have a picture ID that says they're with the Census Bureau. They will also have a phone number that they can give you for you to call and check, I believe. They will never come in your home.
Okay.
And they will never ask you account number, social security number, or any other data than what's on those 10 questions.
So if anybody is asking those kind of questions, notify the Census Bureau,
correct.
Let them know.
If there's any suspicion, they need to get with the Census Bureau or any one of our offices immediately, because if there is a scam, we need to put a stop to it immediately.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because I know people get worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
So there is another form that gets confused with the census, and that is the American Community Survey, the long form. That is not what we are talking about when we talk about the 2010 census, correct?
Correct. Historically, for the 2000 and I believe the 1980 and 1990 censuses also, 1 in 5 households got what's called the long form. Most people got a short form, although it wasn't as short as 10 questions. But then there was the very long form, which had 25 or 30 questions on it and could have taken up to an hour to complete. That doesn't exist anymore for the 2010 census. What's happened is that long form is now the American Community Survey and is mailed out at a different time and is mailed only to a specific number of residents, so that it's a sampling, but it's not the 2010 census.
Because the 2010 census basically wants to know who lives in your house. It asks for your phone number to verify any information if there's confusion. It wants to know if you rent, own, or lease, occupy without rent, which is an interesting option. Also, it wants to know person's sex, date of birth, origin, whether Hispanic, Latin, or Spanish, and race. Basically, that's what they want to know.
For every person in the house.
So if it's other questions, that's not what we're dealing with, and that's not what they should be asking you about either.
Absolutely.
Okay, tell me, so what are we going to learn this year through the census, do you think? They talk a lot about what the recession has caused for us, the hurricanes and natural disasters we've had. What are we going to find out from the census, do you think?
Well, I think for this area, we'll find out just how many people may have really come from New Orleans and whether they stayed or not. I think for Galveston, they'll find out how many have left and whether or not they've come back. I think we'll also find if we really have grown as much as we've got. I think Houston's set to be the third largest city. The county's already the third largest county. So I think Houston is waiting to see whether or not they'll go up a notch. So we'll learn a lot, and I think it'll be really interesting to just see whether the area has surpassed the 4 million and getting closer to 5 million people.
Yeah. Marcus, what are you going to be looking for? 1 second.
Actually, those very same things, as well as, it's always good to know. We've talked about how we think we've grown in terms of race and the count on the diversity, and that would be good information. Though, from a business perspective, you'd like to know where people are centering themselves and what type of goods and services that demographic looks for, and that helps a business owner to make an investment in that area.
Margaret, we'll let you have the last word.
I think what the city of Houston's going to see more than anything is how the different ethnic neighborhoods have changed dramatically, and how the ethnic communities are now reapportioned throughout the whole community as opposed to where they had been 10 years ago. Particularly the Hispanic community, which I believe is probably, we're going to find, is not as isolated as they had been. The numbers have grown and their locations have grown. Our message from all of you, I'm assuming, is when you get this form in the mail, take the few minutes, fill it out, mail it back. Less than 10 minutes even, I'm guessing, from reading it over. And nobody will come visit you at home if you do that and get done with it. And if they do come visit you, they just want to know this information.
And they're friendly just like I am.
Okay, thank you all for coming in. Now each week we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Simply click on the local programs bar, pick Houston 8, and then you can join our online community. Read about the guests, learn more about the topic, share your thoughts and ideas, and even suggest questions that we might ask during upcoming episodes. Remember, information posted on our website may be used on air, so keep that in mind when submitting. That does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Thank you for joining us, and have a great week.